Let's welcome in Greg Anthony with us this afternoon. And GA, where do you let's start with the bottom line. Where do you put OKC in terms of the best teams in the Western Conference right now, based on that threesome?
Well, it's obviously a potent trio. There's no doubt about that. I think a lot of it is going to be determined by how Billy Donovan orchestrates his rotation and the offense he's able to design to kind of maximize the ability of all those guys. We've seen in the past when LeBron teamed up with the guys in Miami, it took them a while to kind of figure it out. I think you're going to see a similar dynamic. The difference, though, is they're still not going to be a team that you would say, okay, this is the best team. It's still Golden State. But I do think that this gives them an opportunity to be in the mix. As Russell Westbrook says, why not me? Why not them now? You look at San Antonio, you look at Houston. I think they feel their core is as good as those guys. And then it's just a matter of how well that supporting cast complements them and then how well those guys play together.
So what kind of tweaks are we talking about? And I completely get the point about the adjustment, because we saw it to some degree with Durant last year in Golden State. We certainly saw it with the big three in Miami back in 2010. They got off to a really middling start. What kinds of things will those three stars individually have to adjust to make the chemistry work as a whole?
Well, I think the biggest adjustments will come from Carmelo and Paul George. Westbrook's the best player of the three, and that's not to say those two guys aren't great, potential Hall of Famers without a doubt. But he's their best player. He's already ingrained in the system. Now, he will adjust as well, but those guys are going to have to figure out ways to impact the game in other areas. And I will say, too, the advantage of OKC, Carmelo's shown he's played his best basketball when he's played with better players. If you look at USA Basketball, you look at the 2 years he's had success, whether it be in New York and in Denver, it was when he had one great point guard play and he had a strong supporting cast. So he knows how to play that way, as does Paul George. But anytime you move down the pecking order in terms of your ability to score, you're going to have to do other things better. Carmelo's going to play some four in this rotation. He's going to have to rebound better in that dynamic. Paul George, I don't know that he makes as big an adjustment as Carmelo does, because he's always been a terrific two-way player. And I think he's a guy that's shown he can play without the basketball. And then Russell will make some, because, again, I go back to why I don't think it's as big an adjustment for him, because he's already played in Donovan's system with Kevin Durant, and obviously Kevin Durant is as good a player as we have in the world. So he's used to playing with a great player. He's never played with two guys that offensively are as capable as these two. And I know people say, oh, with James Harden. When James Harden was there, he was a sixth man, and he wasn't quite the James Harden we've seen since he's gone to Houston, although still a terrific player. So, I mean, they're going to make some, but ultimately, to me, it's more about, okay, how are they going to defend as a group? And again, I'm not talking about winning basketball games. This group will win games, but we're talking about whether or not they can contend in the West. And we'll get a better sense of that, obviously, when we start seeing some head-to-head matchups against the other elite teams in that Western Conference.
GA, I'm going to stick with that theme, and I agree with you 100%. Billy Donovan has to figure out how can he get the team to buy in on the defensive end. But I want to go back into your brain as a point guard. What is Russell Westbrook going through now? The last 2 years, last year with KD being gone, it was always a one-man show. Do you think as a point guard he's saying to himself, I can score less, I have two bona fide scorers I can rock with every night. This should be very interesting for me as a point guard. What is that mindset now, and can he be the point guard in the fourth quarter saying, you know what, I don't have to take the last shot. I have two other guys that can get it done for me.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point. I think the first thing it says to him is this, that management is committed to me, right? Because he hasn't signed his extension yet. And they're saying to him, listen, we're trying to win and win now. We're not going to say this is going to be a complete rebuild, because, you got to remember, they're taking on a huge luxury tax hit with these salaries, a huge hit. And so they're basically not just committing that contract to him, but they're committing a lot of money to the league to put this group together. So that's the first thing from his standpoint. I think that gives him the confidence that maybe this is where he's going to spend the rest of his career. Secondly, I still think he scores at a really high rate. I just think it gets easier for everybody, right? Because think of what he was able to do when he didn't have the supporting cast. He had to play more in the crowd. You're not going to be leaving Carmelo Anthony and Paul George to come help nearly as quickly or as easily. So the game, in some respects, it gets easier. I think we saw that with Golden State last year. You know, there's a reason why Durant went there is because he didn't have to work as hard to score. He was just a more efficient player because, again, he's not playing in the crowd. And so I think that makes the game easier for Westbrook when they figure it out. And I have to emphasize that part. Dennis, you played on great teams. I remember your Orlando teams. It didn't happen overnight once Penny got there, right? Everybody had to assess what guys could do, you know, and then you figure all those things out, and then you start to trust one another in those tough situations, and then you really start to gel. And I think you're going to see that kind of a dynamic eventually. I think the game gets easier for Russ because now where he had to take a lot of tough shots because he didn't have the personnel that could create consistent offense for themselves, I think the game gets easier. He's a smarter player. He's also coming back as the reigning MVP, which is going to make a guy who had supreme confidence even more confident. I'm just excited. I was already pumped to get back to work, you know, after what happened with Kyrie and then obviously Golden State. Now you get this thrown into the mix, man. I tell you, it is going to be something when this season kicks off.
You never know in this league. You know, the spacing thing, as you know, works both ways. One of the Thunder's biggest deficiencies last year was three-point shooting. They were dead last in the league in terms of percentage, 26th in made threes. With these three stars on the floor together, do you anticipate that Melo, Paul George wind up taking more? They're not known as great three-point shooters, but decent three-point shooters. Do you see them taking more and making more, maybe at a higher clip with Russell driving and kicking?
Yeah, I think they do shoot more because, remember, all three guys were first-option guys. And so your first-option guys get the fewest rhythm threes of anybody. Why? Because they get the focal point of the defense. The rhythm threes go to the supporting cast. And so now when you have all those guys out there, the threes that they will get are going to be more rhythm shots. And so that should help their shooting percentage in and of itself. You know, Russell didn't play with anybody that had to be double-teamed a year ago. Neither did Paul George, neither did Carmelo. You know, if you think about Carmelo's case, the rhythm threes a lot of times went to Porzingis, you know, because of the way the game's going to be played. Similarly, it's going to be here. Now all those guys are going to get opportunities because you got to pick your poison. They're also going to face just more one-on-one defense. I mean, that just – listen, at this level, there isn't anybody that can guard the most elite scorers in our league one-on-one. It ain't happening. I don't care how good a defender you are, and we have some great ones. With the way the game is played today, you're not going to stop any great scorer one-on-one. So, yeah, they may not even shoot as many threes, but I think you're going to see a lot with this team. I think they have a chance to be really explosive offensively. And I think also what you're going to see, they're going to get to the free throw line a lot, which will help their defense as well, right? Because now you're going to get to set your defense. You're not just going to be running back in transition playing, you know, against four offensive players when you have three and whatnot. So I think when they figure it out, and I think they will, Billy Donovan's the hell of a coach, I think they're going to be a really potent team.
You know, it's interesting. The Thunder have managed to bring in multiple-time All-Stars without the benefit of a free agent signing to join the league MVP this summer. It's a pretty tough trick. And I don't really have a question for you here, but I just want to get your thoughts on the urgency placed on general managers when they have a star player to build around him in today's NBA, particularly with a guy like Russell Westbrook, and in a market like Oklahoma City, which frankly has had trouble attracting free agents.
Yeah, they have, but they didn't have to because they had two of the arguably five best players of the world. So you didn't have to get A-list guys to come and play. You just needed the right complementary pieces, and they just never completely got over the hump. But don't forget, this team was up 3-1 2 years ago in the conference finals before they kind of fell apart there down the stretch. And Golden State was able to surpass them. But in a lot of ways, Carmelo is a free agent signing because he had a no trade. So
right.
The only way he comes there is if he's willing to do it. So, but you're spot on, man. The other thing is too, it allows them to create the aura of contending now, but it also gives their front office a chance to hit the reset button, because in reality, a lot of this is being done because of what? The Golden State Warriors. All those complementary players and picks and all the things they had gotten in the past, what we saw was, yeah, they were nice, but they're not ready to compete for a title. And so this moves them closer. I don't know that we'll see a dynamic where all three of these guys will be here in 2 years, but the potential to have two of them, and more likely Paul George, if they're fortunate to go with Russell Westbrook, I think is what ultimately they want to have. But this gives them a chance, and it also gives you a chance to see how good you can be. Like that's, a lot of times in the regular season, you can't find out how good you are until you get to the postseason, when you got to play a team 7 times. That's when you find out how far away from the titles you really are.
Right.
And now having Carmelo there, it's going to create a lot of buzz in OKC when you think about the down times they had to go through when Kevin Durant walked away.
Yeah, and a lot of teams don't have that 2 or 3 year timeline. They don't have that luxury to build a team looking that far ahead. Greg, appreciate it as always. Glad we could interrupt your summer here for a few minutes and talk hoops again. We'll see you soon.
You got it. Hey, it's after Labor Day. Summer's over.
It's true.